We live in a city, bustling with human life. Nature and wildlife have been crowded by us into the corner, hemmed in on all sides by concrete and asphalt. Under our gaze, however, is another world too small to be seen with the naked eye, but just as wild and fantastic as any forest. Where there is water, there is life. Microbes are all around us. Their looks and lifestyles may appear alien to outsiders like us, but in many ways their needs are familiar ones. Every food chain begins with the producers, such as these photosynthetic cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria used to be called blue-green algae, but they are in fact prokaryotes, cells whose DNA is not packaged in nuclei. Despite being prokaryotes, cyanobacteria can be very large, and here they are joined up in chains of cells called filaments. They can take other forms. Some species live embedded in a capsule of mucus secreted by the cells themselves. A number can also fix nitrogen, converting nitrogen gas from the atmosphere into ammonia, which organisms can use. They do this using specialized cells called heterocysts. True algae are eukaryotes, cells which contain nuclei and membrane-bound organelles. They carry out photosynthesis with their chloroplasts, which are actually descendants of ancient symbiotic cyanobacteria that have become irreversibly associated with their hosts. These are green algae, the closest relatives of the land plants. The term algae, in general, covers a number of unrelated groups of organisms, meaning that the ability to photosynthesize evolved more than once within the eukaryotes. This cell, called Ficus, is an euglenozoan. It is more closely related to certain kinds of slime mold than it is to green plants. It has chloroplasts, a reddish eye spot, and a flagellum which is used in swimming. Another group of algae, the chrysophytes, contain pigments which give them a golden brown color. They are also flagellated and capable of swimming. Algae that live attached to other algae are called epiphytes, such as these green algae called Characium. They are not parasites because they use their host merely as a surface to grow on. In fact, they can even attach to dead algae. Some diatoms also have this epiphytic lifestyle. Some algae can live symbiotically inside other organisms. These ciliates contain symbiotic algae, which provide them with an additional food source. Having symbionts doesn't stop them from feeding, as ciliates usually do, by phagocytosis. Despite being a single cell, the ciliate behaves in a very animal-like way as it struggles with a bacterial filament that is trying to swallow. It contorts its body and uses the cilia that cover its entire surface to try and gain traction. The ciliate methodically sucks up its prey like a noodle, even as the bacteria are trying to escape. The ciliate is almost winning, but at the last moment, some of the bacteria manage to break free. Most ciliates are phagotrophs, feeding primarily on bacteria and organic detritus, or anything that happens to be passing by. These ones are lucky. They've managed to find their way into the carcass of a dead insect. They've grown fat by gorging themselves on the protein and lipid-rich tissue of the dead animal. Their cells are filled almost to bursting with food vacuoles. This windfall is likely to last them for quite a long time. The exoskeleton of the dead insect also shelters them from any large predators that might come their way. Ciliates can also use their cilia to stir up water that contains food particles. In fact, many ciliate species don't travel in search of food, but anchor themselves to one spot and filter feed. They can be quite selective in which particles they consume and which they reject. To protect their soft bodies, some of them build a hardened shell called test. It's a bit like a house. When threatened, this thuricola can simply shut the door behind itself. Others may not have a door to close, but simply retreat further into their hideouts. After the disturbance is past, they tentatively expand again and unfurl the cilia for feeding. Vorticella uses another strategy. It is attached to its substrate by a long stalk. When bothered, the stalk coils up explosively. For less than a millisecond, it is one of the fastest moving organisms on the planet relative to its body size. The action is triggered by the release of calcium ions in the cell body. It does take a while, though, for the spring to reset itself. This peculiar creature is called a heliozoan, or sun animalcule. It gets its name from the long arms that radiate outwards from the center. It is much less proactive than the ciliates and prefers to let its prey stumble their way into their own demise. These long, stiff arms are called axopods and are made up of cytoskeleton covered by a thin layer of cytoplasm. The central cell body in this case also has a layer of fine scales. Like a spider in the middle of its web, it sits and waits for some hapless passerby to get stuck on one of the arms. But some lucky ones still manage to escape. When trapped, the unfortunate prey is slowly but inexorably drawn inwards towards the cell body. The scales have to be rearranged to make way for the incoming food particle. This takes a while, but the heliozoan is in no hurry. Its dinner is guaranteed. In the cytoplasm are food vacuoles containing the remains of previous victims from the same species in various stages of digestion. The heliozoan itself continues to drift along. Just as the food is being completely engulfed, yet another swimming cell has fallen into the trap. Animals are much more vigorous feeders. They are multicellular and, most importantly, possess muscles. Muscles enable complicated, coordinated movements. This rotifer uses its jaws and digestive system to pump and grasp. Rotifers are mostly soft-bodied, but their muscular pharynx or mastax contain hardened jaws called trophy. They get their name, however, from the wheel or crown of cilia, which they use to stir up water for feeding. Some rotifers prefer to sit and wait. Colotheca is a living funnel. Instead of cilia, its crown has long hairs. Wandering prey are guided into the big, roomy space in front of its mouth. Quick slurp, and they disappear. Arthropods are animals with hard exoskeletons, and they can use this to their advantage in feeding. Their complex mouthparts have multiple moving parts with hardened edges and are used for biting, scraping, grasping, and manipulating food. The microscopic world can be misleading to our instincts. These particles are moving vigorously, but they are not alive. They are pigment granules released from a dead insect, moving because of Brownian motion. Some bacteria can move by gliding, a slow and stately motion. The exact mechanism is still being worked out, but in the case of cyanobacteria, may involve the secretion of polysaccharide slime. Among the eukaryotes, gliding is also common. Diatoms that can glide all possess a structure called the raphe. This is a slit in the silica cell wall. Diatom gliding also involves slime secreted through the raphe. The ciliates, as their name implies, move around by the cilia that cover their cell bodies. Ciliates are diverse in size and shape. This one is shaped like a rugby ball. It also has a layer of organelles just underneath the cell membrane that looks like short parallel lines. These are called trichocysts and are defensive structures that fire explosively when the cell is disturbed. Here's another species that's shaped like a top and even has a little tail. Some ciliates behave in a very twitchy way. The ciliate Halteria has long, stiff, modified cilia that project outwards. This could have a sensory function as an early warning system against predators. The twitchy, jumpy motion of these organisms makes them more difficult prey for their predators. Modified cilia can also occur in flexible bundles called cirri. The row of cirri surrounding the groove in this euplotes cell help to bring food to its mouth, while the larger scattered cirri over the rest of its body are used for locomotion. Cirri can even behave like miniature legs. Despite being a single cell, Aspidisca walks and moves about with its cirri, looking a lot like a microscopic insect. Another characteristic feature is a set of ridges that run down the back of its cell body. Synetocylum looks a lot like Aspidisca and moves in the same way, using its cirri like legs. It also has a set of stiff bristles coming out from its tail end. The cilia are arranged in a circle around mesodynium. Here's another way to walk. The synchronized rowing pushes it forwards or backwards. Sometimes only one flagellum is enough. This small gliding cell uses its flagellum to point away as it moves along the glass slide. Euglena uses its flagellum to swim. Unlike mammalian sperm cells, the flagellum propels from the front. It's very fast, so the series of still images following shows how it whips around the cell body in an S-shaped fashion. There are many species of Euglena, many with ridges, stripes, and other decorations on their cell walls. The large glassy structures inside the cells are polysaccharide granules for food storage. Under unfavorable conditions, Euglena can lose its flagellum and live passively as a photosynthetic algal cell. Apart from swimming with its flagellum, Euglena and its relatives can also squirm out of a tight spot by deforming the whole cell body in a wave-like motion called metaboly. However, some relatives of Euglena, such as Trachelomonas, can't do that because they have a rigid cell wall. At the front is a hole from which its flagellum sticks out. Despite their clunky appearance, they are very fast swimmers. Dinoflagellates are also fast-swimming flagellates. They have two flagella instead of one at the end of the cell and the other located in its central groove. As it swims, the whole cell tumbles around in a spiral. Dinoflagellates are actually close relatives of the ciliates and a malaria parasite, but are quite plant-like. They have cell walls made out of cellulose, and many species are photosynthetic. This golden alga, related to the diatoms, has a single flagellum and is also covered in siliceous scales. One of the golden algae, called Cynura, forms beautiful swimming colonies. The amoebae lack any kind of flagella or cilia. They move by deforming the entire cell body to creep over a surface. It is continually pushing out extensions, called pseudopodia, in all directions. These probe the environment, finding suitable, favorable new pathways. When they are not in contact with any solid surface, however, amoebae look very different. They stick out their pseudopods in all directions, making them look like a star or a caltrop. Some amoebae produce shells or tests for protection. They carry this house along with them as they move. The Phlogia sticks out its pseudopod through the opening of its shell. This makes it look a lot like a snail creeping along. Cytoplasmic extensions can also be long and fine, in which case they are called filopodia. They are dynamic and flexible and are constantly being retracted and extended by nuclearia as it slowly makes its way around. Inside the cell, we can also see the empty cell wall of a diatom that it has fed on. Several species of nuclearia also secrete a layer of mucus or slime around themselves. Bacteria are often embedded within this layer of slime, giving it the appearance of a halo surrounding the cell body. Just as some ciliates behave like animals, some animals behave like ciliates. Gastrotrix are animals that propel themselves using the cilia that cover their bellies. For a microscopic animal, this is a pretty efficient way to move about. Nematode worms, on the other hand, are covered in a cuticle and have no exposed cilia. They crawl and burrow by muscular contractions of their body wall. Rotifers use a combination of techniques. Many species can swim using the water current from their crown of cilia. They are also able to push and creep by bending the body and using its rigid toes to gain traction. The rigid shell, or lorica, of many species is modified into a variety of shapes. Segmented worms, or annelids, are able to move by a pumping, creeping motion called peristalsis. Their internal body cavity is separated into independent compartments by walls called septa. This makes it possible to have waves of contractions sweeping through the whole worm. The worm also has stiff hairs called chaetae that provide additional grip against solid surfaces. We are moving along this worm from rear to front. Finally, we reach the head with its long snout. This is another species of segmented worm. It has bright orange pigmented granules underneath its skin. The worm has found a home in the hollow center of a dead plant stem, which is a nearly perfect fit for its size. Reproduction is what completes the cycle of life. These spores are sprouting new algal filaments. reproduction can be a more dynamic process. These two ciliates are still connected by a thin thread of cytoplasm. Ciliates are capable of asexual reproduction, one cell simply dividing into two. It takes a fair bit of work, however, to be separated from your twin. At last, they manage to break free. But for a short while, they seem unsure of what to do next. Many flagellates also reproduce asexually, such as this Paranema. Each daughter cell has one flagellum, and they are in the process of cleaving from each other. The flagella thrash about vigorously as they try to separate. This here at first appears to be a cell with 4 flagella, an unusual number to have. But a closer look shows it to be 2 cells completing cell division. They found a nice sheltered spot. It has already taken several minutes to reach this point, and finally, they succeed. In animals, reproduction usually requires sex. This is the egg of a flatworm, encased within a hard shell and suspended on the end of a long stalk. The clear area is a developing embryo, nourished by the yolk, which is full of fat globules and on the opposite side of the egg. These beautiful structures are also the result of sexual reproduction, but of a proteus. Slime molds, as the name suggests, are typically found as slimy masses in soil and decaying wood. But when conditions are right, they have sex and develop these fruiting bodies filled with spores. The fruiting bodies stick out into the air to aid the dispersal of the spores and are visible to the naked eye, providing a link between the microscopic world and our world. In our city, we can find a piece of nature almost anywhere we care to look. Even a humble drain, pond, is teeming with life forms, both weird and wonderful. These are the hidden lives, striving to survive and making a living for themselves, just as we are.